ones in the American Legion. He is a member of the Theodore Roosevelt American Legion post in New York, and for a good reason. Theodore Roosevelt IV is a great-grandson of the 26th President of the United States and the grandson of Theodore Roosevelt Jr., both who are recipients of the Medal of Honor. Theodore Roosevelt Jr. is also known as the founder of the American Legion and the author of many of our organizational values. Theodore Roosevelt IV shares those values. Last year, he was appointed to serve as the chairman of the American Legion's 100th Anniversary Honorary Committee. An investment banker for the Barclays in New York City, he has gladly given his time and limitless energy to the American Legion legacy as its first century draws to a close, and to its vision and to its second century begins. Please join me in welcoming Theodore Roosevelt IV.
Commander, thank you for those extremely generous words. Thank you, Legionnaires. Standing before you this morning, with considerable trepidation, I'm reminded of a great speech and a short speech I heard at a change of command ceremony at the Naval Amphibious Base in Coronado. Most of you remember change of command ceremonies. They were interminable, and they always took place on the hottest day of summer. And if you were an officer, you had to scurry around and borrow a sword you might use once more in your career, or go to the post and get another one. Well, this one unfolded as expected. The outgoing CEO, he talked for 43 minutes. We were wilted in the sun. The incoming CEO looked us over and said, "I despise cowards and detest bullshit." Turned around and sat down. We were delighted and let out a yell that could be heard across the bay. Now, on the eve of our centennial, and I fear I will not be as brief as he was, it is appropriate to reflect on our origins. 95 years ago, a value proposition was struck between a group of World War I veterans and the nation under whose flag they'd fought. They were tired. Many were wounded. Some had been gassed. But they were devoted to each other and to the families of those who would not come home from the war or who would come home from it changed. They decided to form a grassroots organization, veterans serving veterans, veterans serving communities, veterans serving young people, veterans serving America. That was their vision. It was ambitious. It was optimistic. The Legion's founders believed that the key to success for this new veterans organization was equality. You checked your rank at the door. If you took the oath of enlistment during wartime and served honorably, you were eligible for membership in the American Legion, regardless of where you served, your gender, or race. Your social, economic, or political standing were irrelevant. What was relevant to the American Legion then remains so today. It is the value of service above self. You should be proud and hold your heads high that the formative principles of the American Legion, the welfare of veterans, families, young people, our military and pride in the country have endured. Those principles have endured through multiple wars, multiple generations, and 10 decades of global change. Their vision has produced a legacy. Through a pure grassroots democracy, veterans and members of the American Legion family have forged some of the most profound changes our nation has ever known. The American Legion spent its first decade lifting up those who'd served our nation and delivered them a good agency, the Veterans Administration, and today is working hard to make it better. VA healthcare and benefits earned by those who served in uniform and by families who sacrificed along them were the product of a value system that could come from no other body than the American Legion. That mission is continued as our troops came home, or did not, from World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, Panama, Grenada, Lebanon, Desert Storm, and the global war on terror. The grassroots democracy of the American Legion has provided opportunities for scores of young people, as you saw earlier this morning, from baseball players to Boy Scouts to children afflicted with disease or haunted by abuse, through programs that are now woven into the fabric of our nation. Boy State, American Legion Baseball, the Child Welfare Foundation, the Legacy Scholarship. The grassroots democracy of the American Legion has been a voice of support for our armed forces on Capitol Hill and in the back room of posts where for decades care packages have been filled and sent to the men and women serving at distant duty stations. In times of natural disaster, hurricanes, wildfires, tornadoes, and a recent superstorm, the American Legion has stepped up with hearts and hands to help those in need. The American Legion has succeeded for nearly a century because it is based on a philosophy of individuals leading themselves and others, working hard to do what's right in service for our country. As the 100th Anniversary Committee has looked back on the Legion's history, a remarkable fact came to life. In the very first year of its existence, the American Legion chartered no fewer than 5,400 local posts nationwide and beyond that are still operating today. I do not know where that ranks among the most successful franchises in American history, but I have to believe few can match it. The 100th Anniversary Committee, led by past national commanders Bob Spinogle, Dave Rybine, and Paul Morin, along with about 24 Legionnaires who distinguished themselves by putting service above self, has formulated plans to celebrate the coming milestone according to one important mantra. Everything the American Legion is and does starts at the local post. Individuals leading themselves and working hard to do what's right for the country. It was a local post that started Boy State. It was a local post that produced American Legion Baseball. It was a network of local posts nationwide that provided the evidence necessary to connect Agent Orange exposure to adverse health and disease linked to service in Vietnam. It was a local post that started the American Legion Riders, which has conducted innumerable acts of support for veterans and families following 9/11. That is why the National Committee has focused its anniversary plans on the achievements and continuing work of the Legion's nearly 14,000 posts. A new interactive website in development and on display at this convention offers a platform for those local posts to gather, document, and share their legacies of service in words, photos, and videos. A paper-based workbook will also be available so that all can share their stories regardless of internet availability or computer expertise. This is not a scrapbook experience. It is a model for other volunteer service organizations to follow. This collection of American Legion Post accomplishments will serve as the world's largest repository of great ideas and good deeds that have made our nation a better place. In addition to the National Centennial website and other media developments coming soon, the 100th Anniversary Committee is working on a documentary film that addresses just one accomplishment in the Legion's legacy, albeit an important one. The GI Bill of Rights, originally known as the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944. Handwritten by Harry Colmary of Kansas and written into legislation by Warren Atherton of California, both World War I veterans and past national commanders of the American Legion, the GI Bill is often credited, rightfully so, for fueling a half-century of prosperity in our nation. The original drafts of the bill, as well as the pen FDR used to sign it, are treasured artifacts of the Legion's first century housed at national headquarters in Indianapolis. The GI Bill is not just a footnote in history for the American Legion. The Legion, as is involved today with the 21st century GI Bill, as it was when a small group of members made their way to a cabin in Georgia to fly a congressman back to Washington in the night to cast the deciding vote that would bring the original GI Bill out of committee. The American Legion has steadfastly advocated for better and more effective GI Bills through the century and was integral to the creation and passage of the post-9/11 version passed in 2008, which is successfully helping thousands of young veterans and their families today. The GI Bill story is more than a legislative accomplishment. It is a parable that illustrates the American Legion's vision. It is a story that spans nearly a century, from the World War I legionnaires who brought it into existence to the Iraq-Afghanistan generation using it today. Now, I'd like to show you a trailer of that film in production.
(1932). The U.S. continues to suffer from the Great Depression. Injured World War I veterans and the widowed families of those killed were in dire need. With so few resources available, they sought relief from the government they had served, and 17,000 World War I veterans marched on Washington, D.C.
When they left the military, they were given $60, a train ticket, and a promise of a bonus someday in the future. I mean, it was pitiful.
Labeled the Bonus Army, they came to convince Congress and President Hoover to pay their military service bonuses, money promised, yet not due for another 20 years. But Congress says no, and patience wears thin.
And then there was this terrible opening of gunfire on the people.
President Hoover commands his generals to drive out the Bonus Army, and for the only time in history, Washington erupts into a war zone between America's military and thousands of her impoverished veterans. (1941), an unprecedented attack against Pearl Harbor draws a neutral nation into a second World War. The American Legion, whose members were born of the First War, stands up to support the next cohort of veterans. Legion members and leadership act to avoid tragedies like the Bonus Army and another Great Depression.
That was the purpose of the Legion, is to make sure that every generation would take care of the future generation.
A Just Return dramatically recounts America's remedy to 16 million veterans of World War II. The GI Bill of Rights was just, hard-won legislation.
People were worried about millions and millions of veterans hitting the employment marketplace at the same time, but it proved itself. It just so dramatically proved itself and how it changed people's lives.
It took veterans and supporters with indomitable spirit to make it so, even locating and flying an ill congressman back to Washington to cast the deciding vote. The GI Bill created opportunities in education and business development.
I was the first one in my family to attend college thanks to the GI Bill. It enabled me later on to not only get my bachelor's degree, but also go on to a master's degree.
It was way ahead of its time in seeing what higher education could do, not only in those individual lives, but then in the aggregate for the country as we became the best educated country on the planet.
And for millions, it meant their first home.
We couldn't afford to put a down payment down or anything. If it wasn't for the GI Bill, we'd have never owned a home, probably.
The industrial renaissance that followed created the most prosperous middle class in history and set the standard for how a grateful nation cares for its returning veterans.
We went out and we did our time, we did our thing, that we got somebody looking out for us, watching our back. Hey, it's a great thing. I mean, just a great feeling.
It's not just a moment in the veteran history, but I think it's a moment in American history.
The GI Bill of Rights, a needed response for service to country, peace, and freedom. A helping hand, not a handout. A just return.
That's poignant and powerful history, and you should be proud of it. Among those interviewed for the film trailer you just saw, former Indiana governor and current Purdue University president, Mitch Daniels, an American Legion Boy State and Boys Nation alum who speaks about the GI Bill's influence, not only for veterans, but for our nation as a whole. Featured in the film are a number of Americans who benefited from the GI Bill, along with a Vietnam War veteran and Legion member, former U.S. Senator Jim Webb of Virginia, architect of the post-9/11 GI Bill. Former Governor Mitch Daniels is one among many prominent Americans who have agreed to join the American Legion's 100th Anniversary Honorary Committee. The full committee is still coming together, but I'm pleased to report that commitments have already been made from a number of distinguished Americans, including an Olympic gold medalist, a Medal of Honor recipient, a former network television anchorman, and a prominent four-star general. The common thread among all honorary committee candidates is that at some point in their lives, the American Legion, typically a local post, made differences for them. We will ask these prominent Americans to lend their voice and prestige and wisdom to the celebration. As the Legion considers the future for its legacy, a vision for the second century. In the coming 4 years, as the war winds down, nearly 1.5 million men and women of the U.S. Armed Services will separate from the military. They return to civilian life with multiple needs and interests, just as the doughboys did at the end of World War I. Like those who came home before them, these post-9/11 veterans are turning to the American Legion. They are learning that the Legion can provide help and understanding like no one else. Recently, I met with a young veteran who started a nationwide nonprofit program to coordinate high-intensity physical fitness activities, long-distance runs, bicycle rides, swimming events, and other outdoor experiences for those who served in the recent war zones. It's called Team Red, White, and Blue, and it has already begun making connections with local American Legion posts. The purpose of the group and its growing membership of nearly 20,000 veterans is to help the new generation make the transition from combat life to civilian life by helping them establish roots and connectivity in their new communities. This young veteran told me that Team Red, White, and Blue honors and respects the American Legion and looks forward to opportunities for connection with the nation's largest veterans organization. There are other such groups of post-9/11 veterans who are turning to the Legion for guidance, encouragement, and welcome. I am utterly convinced that much can be gained through such collaborations. The young veterans who are starting American Legion posts on college campuses using their GI Bill benefits right now are of the same spirit. They have many options, but are finding concrete support from the American Legion and all that it stands for. With the Centennial website I mentioned earlier, there is a place for local posts to share their initiatives and ideas to better serve the 21st century veteran and his or her family. This is the vision portion of the Anniversary Committee's work. It will ask the question, what will your 200,000th anniversary legacy be? If you've not seen the website or talked with national staff about its futures and other opportunities to tell your centennial story, past, present, and future, please visit the booth outside the convention hall this week to learn more. The vision you have for the American Legion today, executed by members working through their local post, will build the legacy future generations will celebrate in 2118 and 2119. Thank you. Thank you for keeping the vision of my grandfather and his fellow veterans alive and flourishing over the past 96 years. It is an honor to serve as chairman of your 100th anniversary committee. May God bless you.